Okay, so in today's video, we're going to look at the First Arab-Israeli War, which takes place from 1948 to 1949. By the end of today's class, you should be able to answer the following three questions. What caused the First Arab-Israeli War? Why did the Israelis win the war? What were the results of the war for Israel as well as the Arab states? So if you recall, at the end of last class, we ended with Israel declaring itself as a nation on May 14th, 1948. And if you remember, the very next day, May 15th, the armies of the Arab nations surrounding Israel attacked. So on this map, you can see where those armies were coming from and attacking. So the Lebanese, Syrian, Iraqi, Jordanian, and Egyptian. So now we're going to look at what actually happened. But before we do, I have some random bits of information. So Israelis call this war the War of Independence, whereas Arabs call it al-Nakba, or the disaster, the catastrophe. And al-Nakba refers to the period or the events that occur from 1947 to 1949, and especially the dispossession and flight of the Palestinian Arabs, so the Palestinian refugee crisis. And the Haganah, which was an extremist defense force, or a Zionist defense force, is transformed into the Israeli Defense Force and forms the backbone of the Israeli army. So what happened? The expectation of the Arabs was that they would quickly defeat the Israelis, but that didn't happen. So what did happen? Well, the war is divided into three different phases. In the first phase, from May 15th to June 11th, the Haganah, or the IDF, is fighting the Transjordan Arab Legion, the Transjordan Army, for Jerusalem. And basically, the Israeli army captures West Jerusalem, but can't defeat the Arab Legion in the eastern part of the city. And the old city of Jerusalem remains under Arab control. In June, the UN arranges a ceasefire, which lasts for a month. During that ceasefire, Israel gets more weapons and trains more troops. However, the Arabs were not actually able to get any more weapons or any more supplies because of a UN arms embargo. Fighting breaks out again in July. The Israeli army captures large areas of the proposed state at this time. This includes parts of Galilee in the north, the Negev desert in the south, and a large amount of land near Jerusalem. However, Israelis are still unable to capture the old city of Jerusalem, which remains under the control of the Arab Legion. The UN again arranges a second ceasefire, and the Israelis are in a very strong position at this point. For this ceasefire, the UN sends in a special mediator named Count Bernadotte of Sweden, and he's there to negotiate a compromise. He proposes a plan in which Israel would lose a lot of the territory that they had gained. And Israelis did not like this plan at all. And the day after it was announced, the Count was assassinated by a member of the Lehi extremist group. A lot of the moderate Israelis, as well as the West, thought that things had gone a bit too far when this assassination took place. And the Israeli government disbanded and dissolved Irgun and Lehi, those two extremist groups. However, a lot of those members joined the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force. A third round of fighting broke out in October. At this point, the Israel forces capture the whole of Galilee and push Egypt back to the Sinai Desert. The Arabs are only left with a small amount of area in Gaza, like the Gaza Strip. Under American pressure, the Israelis withdraw from Egyptian territory, and final armistices are signed throughout 1949. So the general results of the 1948-1949 war, well, basically Israel had gained 78% of Palestine instead of the 56 allocated to it by the UNESCOP plan. So you can see in that map, all of that purple area is territory that was seized by the state, by Israel, which was not part of the plan. And they don't want to give it back. As well, the Arab states surrounding Israel refused to recognize Israel as a country. And there are a number of armistices signed. Israel signs armistices with all the different countries surrounding it, but there are no formal peace treaties. So technically, they're still in a state of war. So why did Israel win the war? Israel had a number of advantages. It had more soldiers involved in the fighting than the Arab countries did. These soldiers were very well trained and had a lot of experience. Some had fought for Britain during World War II. They had a lot of modern equipment from abroad, particularly from the USA, which about $50 million was given to Israel from the USA to buy weapons for the war. They were well organized, they had a well organized system of command, and they were unified, fighting for the same goal. And they were fighting over a smaller area so they could be quick and efficient with their movement. The Arab countries, on the other hand, had fewer soldiers, because you have to remember that there are many different countries fighting. There's this lack of unity, no central authority, there's no common purpose. Different countries are fighting for different reasons, and there's distrust between the different leaders of the different countries. In fact, even with the Arab Palestinians, they're divided amongst themselves. So you can see the Arab countries quite disjointed and not unified, whereas Israel is united and has one goal. The specific results of the war, in this Venn diagram, we're going to look at the results that Israel and the Arab both had. So both of them could expect fighting at any time, more fighting at any time. They're sort of permanently on war footing. They have to be on their guard. Israel might be attacked by the Arab states and vice versa. We also have a number of Palestinians leaving Israel, which is creating the Palestinian refugee crisis, which we'll look at a little bit more in more detail. And in 1950, there's a tripartite declaration in which Britain, France, and the USA say that they would use force against either Israel or the Arab states if either Israel or the Arab states used force to alter the armistice lines. So the West is saying no more fighting. Specifically for Israel, as we've seen, gained a lot of land. They become quite dependent on the USA for financial contributions from Jewish people, but also the US government. Israel becomes a democracy in which even Arabs can vote. Israel is formally recognized by the USA and the USSR. And as we've said before, about 800,000 Palestinians are leaving Israel. In addition, in 1950, Israel enacts this law of return, which states that every Jew has the right to return to Israel. As a result of this law, the Jewish immigration to Israel increases dramatically, and because there's more immigration, the Jewish population of Israel rises. And I added the statistics because I think they're quite impressive. So in 1948, you have 770,000 Jewish people in Israel. By 1954, you have 1,717,814. So the population increases by about 1 million people in less than 10 years. That is a huge population increase. Because of the population increase, new settlements have to be built. to house the new immigrants. And because new settlements are being built in this area, Arabs are getting very angry. For the Arab states and Palestinians become a people without a country, just as Jews had been prior to the creation of Israel. In terms of the Palestinian refugee crisis, the refugees are moving to different areas of the Arab world, and they live in horrible refugee camps with awful conditions. These refugee camps become training grounds for Fedayeen, who are guerrilla freedom fighters or terrorists, depending on what side you're looking at them. The most important guerrilla group is Al-Fatah, which is led by Yasser Arafat, which also becomes part of the Palestine Liberation Organization. These are important names that you should know for the future. And with these freedom fighter terrorist groups, guerrilla groups, Palestinian attacks on Israeli targets begin. So in 1951, 137 Israelis are killed. In 1955, 238 were killed. So Palestinian attacks on Israeli targets. Another effect on the Arab states is that the West becomes suspicious of the Arab world, which leads to the Arab states looking towards the USSR for aid. So you have a Cold War aspect to the Middle East. And there's also a belief that Israel has to be destroyed for the Arab states to be safe. And there's increased support for Arab nationalists in places like Egypt, which is what we will look at in our next video. So right now I just want to show you, we're going to end off with a map that shows you where the Palestinian refugees are going. So you can see 14% to Lebanon, etc., etc. So that's it for today. I hope you've taken good notes and are ready for the testing class.